Under the orange haze of a fading summer sky, Layla Jennings stood barefoot in the middle of a broken tennis court, the cracked surface beneath her toes feeling like an echo of her emotions, imperfect, flawed, and still somehow beautiful. The old court behind her grandmother's house had been her childhood refuge, but tonight it felt different, like a stage awaiting a new play. Her chest rose and fell in slow waves, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and regret. She had come home to Maplewood for peace, to escape the wreckage of a relationship that had left her hollow, but peace wasn't what she found. She found him, Shane Mercer, and his lips, which haunted her thoughts even more than his lies. Shane had always been trouble, even when they were kids. Reckless, magnetic, and unrepentantly charming. The type of boy mothers warned their daughters about, except Layla hadn't listened then, and she wasn't sure she could resist now. He hadn't changed much. The same careless swagger, the same smirk that made her forget how to breathe, the same stormy green eyes that saw too much. What had changed was her older now, more guarded, and far less willing to let her heart write checks reality couldn't cash. She turned at the sound of gravel crunching under boots. Shane was walking toward her from the woods, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn leather jacket, his gaze fixed on her like she was the only thing worth seeing. She stiffened but didn't move. Running wasn't her style, and besides, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "You always this dramatic, Jennings?" he called, his voice rough around the edges like whiskey poured over gravel. She rolled her eyes. "Says the guy making a movie entrance out of the trees." He grinned, a slow, dangerous thing. "Couldn't resist. You looked like a ghost out here." "Maybe I am," she said, stepping back. "Or maybe I just don't want to be seen by you." He stopped a few feet away, the tension between them electric and heavy with things left unsaid. "Still mad about New York?" Layla's heart clenched. "I'm not mad, Shane. I'm just not the same girl who believed you when you said you'd come back. I did come back, 2 years too late." His jaw tightened. "I made mistakes. I own that. But I didn't stop thinking about you, not once." Her laugh was bitter. "You expect that to mean something now? After ghosting me, after everything?" "I didn't ghost you," he said, stepping closer. "I protected you." "Don't you dare," she snapped, her voice rising. "Don't you dare act like walking away was noble. You left me hanging in that city, Shane. You didn't call. You didn't write. You didn't even give me closure. You just vanished." Silence fell, thick and raw. The cicadas hummed in the trees, but even their noise seemed distant. "I got involved with things," he said finally, voice low. "Things I couldn't drag you into. You deserved more than what I was becoming." Her eyes searched his face. He looked older, leaner, harder, like life had carved its lessons into his bones. "What were you becoming?" He looked away. "Someone you wouldn't have loved." The ache in her chest pulsed stronger. She hated that she still wanted to touch his face, to trace the line of his jaw and pull him into the kind of kiss that erased time. But she couldn't trust her instincts anymore. "Not with him. That's not your decision to make," she whispered. He nodded slowly, like he accepted the weight of her pain. Then, as if deciding it was too soon, he stepped back. "Maybe not, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." "You say that like it's a promise," she said. "But I've heard those from you before." He didn't argue. Instead, he walked to the edge of the court, picked up an old tennis ball, and bounced it twice. "Remember when we used to play out here? Loser had to swim in the lake at midnight, and you always lost on purpose." He grinned again. "Not always." They stayed there until the sky turned violet, and even then, neither made a move to leave. When she finally turned to go, she heard his voice again, softer this time. "You were always the only thing that felt like home." She paused, but didn't turn back. The next day, Maplewood buzzed with the town's annual summer carnival. Layla walked the midway with her best friend Nora, trying to blend into the noise and color. But even the sticky, sweet smell of cotton candy and the sound of laughing kids couldn't drown out the feeling that Shane was still orbiting somewhere nearby, and he was. She spotted him across the crowd, talking to her cousin Evan, who ran security for the carnival. Evan didn't look happy. Layla's stomach twisted when Shane caught her eye and started walking toward her. "I need to talk to you," he said, pulling her aside near the Ferris wheel. "You really don't," she said. "I'm trying to enjoy my day without drama." "This isn't about us," he said. "It's about what I got into after I left, and how it might be catching up to me." "What does that even mean?" "It means there are people looking for me, Layla. Dangerous people, and they don't play fair." She folded her arms. And what? You brought that mess to my doorstep. I didn't have a choice. Someone's been asking around about you too. Fear lanced through her. Me? Why? To get to me, he said. They think I care about you. Do you? She whispered. His eyes darkened. More than I should. Which is why I need you to leave Maplewood for now. No, Layla, I'm not running again. And I'm sure as hell not running because of your baggage. Then at least let me stay close. Protect you. You lost that right when you walked away. But later that night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling of her grandmother's old guest room, Layla felt the stirrings of something she couldn't bury. Not fear, not anger, something worse. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, Shane wasn't lying this time. The next morning, she woke to find her car keyed, her tires slashed, and a note under the windshield that read, "He can't save you." And suddenly, everything she thought was over was only just beginning. The morning after the threat, Layla stood in her driveway staring at the damage to her car, her hands trembling at her sides. The jagged lines etched into the paint seemed less like vandalism and more like a message, one that whispered danger. With every slash, she could still feel the weight of the paper note in her palm, its words burned into her memory. He can't save you. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs, and a chill climbed her spine despite the sun blazing overhead. This wasn't a prank. This was real. And Shane had dragged it here. She didn't call the police. Maplewood officers were slow to act and too intertwined with the town's gossip mill. Instead, she called Nora, who arrived 10 minutes later in her beat-up Jeep, her expression grim as she took in the scene. Jesus, Nora muttered. This is some next-level Lifetime movie shit. It's not a joke, Layla said. Someone knows where I live. Someone knows about Shane. Then, maybe it's time to start asking what the hell he's really involved in. That same question had been gnawing at Layla since yesterday. She had known Shane had secrets, he always had, but this was different. This was life or death territory, and she wasn't sure if she could handle it. But she wasn't the girl he left behind anymore. She wasn't scared of the dark. Not entirely. She found him later that day at the old boathouse, the place they used to sneak off to during summers when the lake was high and full of stars. He was sitting on the edge of the dock, skipping rocks across the still water, but when he saw her approach, he stood immediately. Layla cut the act. Shane, what kind of people are after you? He hesitated, jaw tightening. You really want the truth? No, she said, voice shaking. I want the fantasy. But since that's off the table, yes, I want the truth. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. When I left New York, it wasn't because of you. It was because I was offered a way out of the life I'd gotten tangled in, a life that wasn't clean. I worked for a guy named Carson Lane. He ran underground poker games for high rollers, celebs, politicians, criminals. I was one of his fixers. I made sure things ran smooth, quiet. But one night, I found out Carson was skimming from his own operation and pinning it on someone else. I got involved, tried to help the wrong guy, and it blew up in my face. Layla stared at him, the words swimming. So you were a criminal. I didn't see it that way then, he said. I thought I was surviving. But now, yeah, I was deep in it. And now, Carson's missing. The feds think I know where he is. His enemies think I helped him disappear. And someone out there is trying to use you to get to me. Layla's world tilted, reality crashing down like glass shattering around her. Why didn't you tell me all of this before? Because I didn't want to drag you into it. You already did. He stepped forward, reaching for her hands, but she pulled back. I'm not yours to protect, Shane. Not anymore. I never stopped loving you, he said. Even when I was gone. Especially then. She shook her head. That's not enough. Love doesn't fix this. I know, he said. That's why I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to keep you alive. Layla walked away then, not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much and didn't know how to separate that from the fear blooming in her chest. She needed time to think, but Maplewood wasn't giving her that luxury. The next night, the carnival's lights lit the town again, and she agreed to meet Nora by the food trucks. But Nora never showed. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. If you want your friend back, come alone. No cops. No Shane. You've got 1 hour. Panic flared like lightning. Layla called, but Nora's phone rang unanswered. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. She didn't know what to do, only that she had no time to think. She left a note at her grandmother's house just in case and took off in her grandmother's old station wagon, the only car left with intact tires. The message had included an address, an abandoned farm on the edge of Maplewood, the kind of place no one went anymore. Her palms slicked with sweat as she drove through the darkening countryside, heart pounding in her throat. The farm loomed like a ghost on the horizon, its windows hollow, its roof sagging. She parked and stepped out into the quiet, the wind whispering through dry grass. She walked up the path slowly, whispering Nora's name, but the only answer was the creak of an open barn door. Inside, it was darker than night. The air smelled of oil and dust, and in the far corner, she saw a figure slumped in a chair. "Nora," she called, rushing forward. But it wasn't Nora. It was Shane, bound, bruised, and barely conscious. "Layla," he croaked. "Run." Before she could move, the barn door slammed shut behind her, and a voice sliced through the silence. "Told you he couldn't save you." She spun around as a man stepped from the shadows, face hidden beneath a ball cap, a gun gleaming in his hand. "Where's Nora?" Layla demanded. The man smiled coldly. "She'll live if you do exactly what I say." Her blood ran cold. He grabbed her by the arm and shoved her against a beam. "Time to send a message. Carson took something that belonged to me. Shane helped. And now, you're going to help me get it back. I don't know anything, you will." Then he raised the gun and everything went black. Layla woke hours later on the floor of the barn, her hands zip-tied behind her back. Shane was awake now too, eyes blazing with rage and pain. His lip was split, his shirt soaked in blood, but he was alive. And beside him was a burner phone left by their captor, flashing with a single message: 24 hours. Find Carson, or she dies first. And in that moment, as Shane looked at her with every ounce of guilt and love in his eyes, Layla realized something she never wanted to admit. She still craved his lips, even if they might get her killed. Rain hammered against the roof of the barn as if the sky itself were furious at the events unfolding beneath it. Layla sat in the cold, damp corner, her wrists raw from trying to break the zip ties, blood smearing her skin in thin, desperate streaks. Shane sat slumped beside her, a deep cut on his temple bleeding sluggishly, but his mind was anything but dull. His breathing was shallow, but the storm in his eyes hadn't dimmed. The burner phone between them buzzed again, casting a ghostly glow in the shadows. Another message. 23 hours left. Tick-tock, lovebirds. Layla stared at the words, her heart pounding like a war drum. "Carson Lane," she said slowly, tasting the name like poison. "Why does everyone think you know where he is?" "Because I used to," Shane muttered, finally lifting his head. "He trusted me more than anyone, until I betrayed him." Layla blinked. "You betrayed him? You said he was skimming, that you were trying to do the right thing." "I did try," Shane said. "But when Carson found out, I knew. He gave me a choice: take the fall for him, or disappear. I disappeared. But before I did, I stole something from him. Insurance. A flash drive." Her eyes widened. "You never told me any of this. I never wanted you involved in that part of my world," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "But now it's too late." "What's on the drive?" "Client lists, bribes, videos. It could ruin senators, CEOs, people who paid him to keep secrets hidden. And if these guys think I still have it, they'll kill us both." Layla finished, her mouth suddenly dry. Shane leaned against the wall, exhaling hard. "I buried it before I left New York, in a storage unit under a fake name. I haven't been back since." Layla stared at him. "Then we need to get out of here, tonight. Even if we do, we've got to problems," Shane said, his voice edged with desperation. "1, we don't know where Nora is. And 2, whoever's behind this won't stop unless we deliver that drive or die trying." She stood slowly, testing the strength of the beam behind her. "Then we give them the drive. But on our terms." "How?" he asked. "We're tied up in the middle of nowhere, under surveillance, and we're out of time." "Not we," Layla said, her eyes burning. "Me. You're too injured, but I've still got a little fight left." Using a nail sticking out of the wall, she began sawing at the plastic, biting into her wrists. Pain lanced up her arm with every movement, but she kept going, fueled by adrenaline and something deeper: love, anger, survival. Finally, with a soft snap, the zip tie broke. She helped Shane sit up straighter, then searched the barn and found an old toolbox. Inside were a rusted screwdriver and a box cutter, enough to free him and maybe, just maybe, survive this. They escaped. through a loose panel at the back of the barn, crawling into the thick woods just before headlights swept through the windows. Whoever was watching hadn't expected them to move so soon. The wind bit at their clothes as they stumbled through mud and branches, following the curve of the river toward the road. Layla's mind ran faster than her feet, calculating, remembering, hoping. They made it to town just before dawn, soaked and shaking. They broke into an abandoned mechanic's shop where Shane once worked summers, and Layla used the office phone to call an old friend from her New York journalism days, Milo Vargas. Milo picked up groggy, annoyed. "Layla, it's been years. I know, but I need you. You still have contacts at that storage facility on 17th? A pause. You in trouble? Yes. Life and death. I need the contents of Unit 43 under the name Shane Maddox. Can you get it?" Another pause. Then, "Give me an hour." She hung up and turned to Shane. "We're getting your insurance." "Then what?" "Then we figure out how to use it." But nothing ever went according to plan. Milo called back 2 hours later, his voice shaking. The unit was broken in two. Files gone. The cameras were wiped clean. But Layla, someone left a message on the wall, written in blood. She gripped the phone. What did it say? Milo's voice dropped to a whisper. "We warned you." Shane punched the wall, pain radiating through his arm. "They're always one step ahead." Layla paced, adrenaline crashing into dread. "They knew we'd go for it. They were watching. They set us up." But then her phone buzzed again, this time. A video message. She opened it with trembling fingers. It was Nora, tied to a chair, mouth gagged, eyes red from crying, and then the camera shifted to a man's face. Layla gasped. It wasn't just any man. It was Carson Lane, alive, smiling. "Hello, Layla," he said, voice like silk over a knife. "Long time. You're braver than I thought. But this isn't about you. It's about Shane. He took something from me, something valuable. And now, you're going to deliver something else in exchange for your friend's life." He held up a small vial filled with clear liquid. "This is synthetic truth serum. Very illegal, very effective. You're going to inject Shane with it, record his confession, everything he knows about me, every detail. Then you'll send it to this number. And if I don't receive that file in 12 hours, your friend dies screaming." The video cut. Silence swallowed the room. Shane's jaw was clenched, eyes locked on Layla. "You're not doing it. I might not have a choice." "There's always a choice. You don't drug the person you love." Tears welled in her eyes. "You think I don't know that? You think this doesn't destroy me?" But he stepped forward, cupping her face despite the shaking in his hands. "Then let me make it for you. Do it." She shook her head. "No, Layla, if it buys her time, we take the shot. But if they kill her anyway, they might. But if we do nothing, they will." Her hands trembled as she looked at the vial. Then she made a decision. She sent Carson a text. "We'll give you the file, but I'm not injecting him. You want answers? You get them in person." The reply was immediate, bold, risky. 12 hours. Abandoned chapel. Bring the file. Or bring a body bag. When they arrived at the chapel that night, Layla carried a backpack filled with decoys, dummy drives, false files, everything Milo helped fabricate in a rush job that might not hold up. She knew it was a gamble. She also knew she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try. They entered the crumbling building, moonlight spilling through the broken stained glass. Carson stood at the altar, surrounded by 2 armed men. Nora was in the pew behind them, still alive but barely. Layla walked forward slowly. Carson extended his hand. "The file." Layla handed over the drive. "Release her first." He smirked. "Still negotiating. I like that." But before the deal could finish, a loud crack echoed through the chapel. A gunshot. Shane screamed. Layla turned, saw Shane drop to the ground. Blood soaked his shirt, and everything inside her shattered. Layla screamed as Shane collapsed, her voice tearing through the still air like a thunderclap. Time froze, the chapel swallowing every sound. As his body hit the ground, her knees buckled, and she crawled to him, hands pressing desperately against the spreading red stain on his chest. "Shane, no. No, don't do this to me," she cried, her fingers slick with his blood, her heart unraveling with every second he didn't respond. Carson stood motionless at the altar, the gun in his hand still smoking. "Wasn't meant to be lethal," he said flatly. "But that depends on how fast you cooperate now." Layla turned to him, eyes blazing with hate and fear. "You shot him, and you brought me lies," Carson said, waving the flash drive in the air. "Fake files, fabricated time stamps. You think I wouldn't notice? You never intended to let her go, Layla spat, gesturing to Nora, whose bruised face was barely visible in the flickering candlelight. You were going to kill all of us anyway. Carson smiled, and it chilled her blood more than the storm raging outside. Not all of you, just the one who betrayed me. He knelt beside Shane's twitching form. You should have stayed hidden, Maddox. But you never could resist coming back for the girl. Layla's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers curling around the cold edge of the box cutter she'd hidden there. Carson noticed too late. She lunged. The blade slashed across his forearm, forcing him to drop the gun. He cursed, stumbling back, and Layla didn't hesitate. She grabbed the weapon and fired wildly. One of Carson's men fell instantly. The other ducked, returning fire, bullets ripping into the pews as Layla pulled Shane's body behind the pulpit, shielding him with her own. Help me, she screamed at Nora, who was still bound, struggling weakly. Layla slid the blade across the floor, and Nora caught it between her fingers, sawing at the ropes with frantic speed. In seconds she was free, and Layla tossed her the gun. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The next 5 minutes were chaos and blood. Gunfire echoed off the chapel walls. Nora took down the second man with a clean shot to the chest. Carson disappeared into the shadows, bleeding and furious, but he didn't leave without a parting shot, one that struck the wall inches from Layla's head before he vanished into the night. When it was over, the silence was deafening. Layla dropped the weapon and fell beside Shane again, sobbing uncontrollably. Stay with me, please, she whispered. You don't get to die, not after everything. Nora knelt beside them, pulling her phone from her back pocket. Ambulance is on the way. Just keep pressure on the wound. But Shane's eyes were open barely. He looked at Layla like she was the only light in the world. You didn't run, he rasped, voice barely audible. I never will, she whispered. He smiled faintly. You always were trouble. She pressed her forehead to his, tears falling like rain. You should have seen yourself, bleeding all over the floor. For me, that's not just trouble. That's love. His lips twitched in what could have been a laugh. Still crave them? Always, she breathed, kissing him so gently it barely touched skin, as if afraid he'd vanish. The ambulance arrived just as Shane lost consciousness. 3 days later, Layla sat beside his hospital bed, her fingers curled around his. The doctors said he was lucky the bullet missed his heart by a hair. Another inch and she would have lost him. Nora paced in the hallway, talking to the detective who had finally shown up with interest after 2 dead men were found in a church and a third wanted fugitive had disappeared again. Carson Lane had vanished. The flash drive was gone. And even though she and Shane had survived, Layla knew it wasn't over. When Shane finally stirred, blinking up at the hospital ceiling, she was already leaning over him, brushing his hair off his forehead. You came back, he murmured. I never left. Did we win? She smiled. No, but we survived. That's a start. They didn't talk about what would come next. Not yet. But as she leaned in to kiss him, soft and slow, she knew this wasn't just survival anymore. This was a vow. A promise made not with words, but with the heat of his lips against hers and the fire still smoldering in her chest. But that night, as she walked Nora to the parking lot, her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. You think this is over? And with that single message, she realized the danger hadn't passed. It had only just begun. The message sat like a loaded gun on her screen, quiet and small but deadly. You think this is over? Layla didn't reply. She didn't have to. The words echoed in her skull louder than any bullet ever could. Across the parking lot, Nora tightened her coat around her shoulders, eyes scanning the shadows like she could feel the same weight pressing down on her chest. You okay? Nora asked, her voice low, raw from everything they'd been through. Layla shook her head. No, and I don't think we will be for a long time. They parted with a hug that lingered, 2 survivors clinging to the only thing they knew wasn't a lie, each other. When Layla returned to Shane's hospital room, he was awake, staring at the ceiling like it held the answer to a riddle he'd been trying to solve for years. You saw it too, didn't you? She asked quietly, slipping into the chair beside him. He didn't look at her, but his jaw tightened. Yeah. Carson was alive, still hunting, still playing, and this time, it wasn't just about the flash drive or secrets. It was personal. 2 weeks passed. Shane was released from the hospital, though his movement was stiff and slow, the scar a fresh reminder of how close he'd come to dying. Layla moved him into her apartment, ignoring his protests. "You saved my life," she told him as she made him tea. You don't get to argue about couch space, but the air between them was tight, thick with unspoken things. Sometimes she caught him standing by the window, watching the street for too long. Sometimes he caught her jumping at the sound of a car backfiring. Neither of them were sleeping. Neither of them admitted it. On the 15th night, he turned to her, his voice quiet but sharp. "We can't live like this." "I know," she whispered. "You saw what Carson's capable of, and I saw what we're capable of." She crossed the room and stood before him. "You think he gets to keep winning? Keep chasing us into shadows? I won't let that happen." He touched her cheek. "Then we need to stop reacting. We go on offense." She nodded. "Let's hunt him." But Carson wasn't waiting for them to make the next move. He made it for them. They were at Milo's apartment, laying out potential connections, bribed judges, offshore accounts, people Carson used to control. The whiteboard was a chaotic mess of names, strings, red arrows. Milo had just circled the name Dominic Keller, one of Carson's old investors, when the room shook with the force of an explosion. Shane dove on top of Layla instinctively. The living room window shattered in a blast of heat and smoke. Car alarms screamed outside. Fire licked the hallway floor. When the smoke cleared and the sirens faded, Milo was gone. So was the evidence. The message was clear: stop digging. But Layla didn't stop. She doubled down. They left the city that night, traveling to the place where Shane once buried the real flash drive, a hidden cabin upstate where he used to hide when things got too loud. It was cold, tucked into the woods like a forgotten secret. And for the first time in weeks, it was quiet, too. Quiet. "I feel like we're being watched," Layla said as she unpacked old files. Shane looked up from the laptop. "Because we are. But that's not the problem." She arched a brow. "Then what is?" He turned the screen toward her. There, pulled from a recovered backup drive Milo had once saved to a secure cloud, were video files labeled with dates and initials. One caught her eye. LRN 12/11/2018. She clicked it. The screen came to life with shaky handheld footage of a hotel room, and there she was, younger, dressed in black, pacing. Carson's voice on the recording. "Just tell me where the drive is, Layla." Her voice trembling, angry. "You think threatening me will work?" "Not threatening," Carson had said. "Testing." And then a scream. The video cut out. She dropped the laptop. "That night," she whispered, "I blocked it out. I thought it was a nightmare. I didn't realize he drugged me. He was there before all of this. He's been planning this for years." Shane stood, fury boiling in his blood. He knew we'd end up together. He wanted it. He wanted to watch it all fall apart. But Layla wasn't breaking this time. She was hardening. They spent the next 2 days planning, reaching out to old enemies, dirty cops, anyone with a grudge against Carson. One by one, they found cracks in his empire, former allies willing to talk, names they'd never known, until finally, one call changed everything. A woman named Lena. She used to work for Carson. She had proof, but only if they met in person. A diner. Midnight. No phones. No backup. It screamed trap, but they didn't have a choice. They arrived early, sat in the back booth, waited. At 12:17 a.m., Lena walked in, and just behind her, Carson, not hiding, not armed, smiling like the devil in a tailored coat. Layla's heart stopped. He slid into the booth across from them like they were old friends meeting for coffee. "I figured it was time for us to stop playing games. You've killed people," Shane growled, "framed others, terrorized us." Carson shrugged. "So have you, in your own ways." Layla leaned forward. "Why? Why all of this?" Carson's eyes glittered. "Because I don't like being stolen from. And I don't lose." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything I've done, every name, every file right here. A trade. My empire. For one thing." Layla stared at him. "What?" Carson smiled. "Your silence." And then he looked straight at Shane. "Or I go after everyone you love." Again. Layla reached for the drive slowly, but the second her fingers touched it, a shot rang out. Blood splattered the table. Lena gasped. Carson slumped forward, a red dot on his forehead. "A sniper." Layla screamed. Shane ducked, pulling her under the booth. Outside, tires screeched. Whoever had pulled the trigger was already gone. Inside, Carson's body lay slumped over the table, dead, this time for real. But as Layla reached for the flash drive again, she saw it, on the bottom of the drive. A small etched number, 1 of 7, and her stomach dropped. because this wasn't the end. This was just the first piece. The forest whispered secrets around them as Layla stared at the flash drive in her trembling hand. One of 7, she said softly, like if she repeated it enough times, it would start to make sense. But it didn't, not even close. Carson was dead, his body zipped into a bag, his blood still fresh on the diner floor, yet somehow he had managed to haunt them from beyond the grave. Shane stood beside her, his eyes narrowed, fists clenched like he could punch a ghost. This was never about one drive. It was never about just us, he muttered. It was bigger, so much bigger. The morning after the shooting, they left town. The media exploded with stories. Carson Lane, the disgraced billionaire and secret criminal kingpin, taken out in a mysterious sniper hit. No suspects, no footage, no witnesses, just silence, as if the world had already decided to bury his sins alongside his body. But Layla and Shane couldn't move on. Not yet. Not with 6 more drives unaccounted for. Not with so many loose ends still fraying around them like live wires. Their first lead came from Lena, who refused to speak at the police station but agreed to meet them again in a safe house Shane secured deep in the Catskills. She arrived, looking shaken but determined, holding an old, battered leather journal in her arms. I used to be his fixer, she said without ceremony. I know where the others might be, but if we go after them, it's all or nothing. These drives aren't just about Carson's blackmail material. They're keys to something he called the Hollow Crown. Layla frowned. What is it? Lena looked up at her with hollow eyes. A network of billionaires and killers who think the world is their chessboard. Carson wasn't the king. He was just a knight. The blood drained from Layla's face. Shane stepped forward. So who's the king? Lena opened the journal to a symbol scrawled in ink, an Ouroboros encircling a crown. That's what we're going to find out. The hunt began. Drive 2 was hidden in a storage locker in Detroit, buried under years of dust and false names. Layla nearly lost a hand to a rigged trap laced with mercury gas, but Shane yanked her out in time. They cracked the drive in a motel. An hour later, emails, voice memos, security logs, a senator, a CEO, a classified deal signed under a different administration. Each file was worse than the last. Drive 3 came with a body, a hacker named Rowan. Someone Shane once trusted, had it, but by the time they reached him in Baltimore, he was already dead, poisoned. The drive had been mailed to Shane's fake P.O. box hours earlier, as if someone was toying with them, testing their reactions. The files on that drive pointed to offshore accounts, a shipping company with ties to arms deals, and a private island used for training exercises involving mercenaries. They barely had time to breathe before a black SUV tried to run them off the road in Virginia. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was war. By the time they reached New Orleans, they were exhausted, bruised, paranoid, and out of safe houses. They holed up in an abandoned speakeasy that Nora helped them secure, her voice tight over encrypted phone calls. You're making enemies out of monsters, she warned. There's no winning this, only surviving. Then we survive. Louder, Layla whispered. Drive 4 was found inside an old piano in that speakeasy's hidden cellar. It contained photographs, ones that made Layla go cold. Her at 17. Shane, years before he met her. Nora, Carson, other men and women they didn't recognize. Their faces circled in red. They'd been watched for years. Groomed, maybe. Chosen. None of this was accidental. They planned our lives like scripts, Layla whispered. Like stories. Shane took her hand. But they forgot who's writing the ending. They made love that night like it was their last. Bodies tangled in desperation. Lips pressed like they could rewrite their own past through each kiss. His touch reminded her of everything they'd survived, of every time he bled for her, every lie they broke together. Your lips, she murmured against his mouth. Still trouble. He smiled, then craved them harder. The 5th drive led them to the desert, Nevada, a military base long abandoned, supposedly. Layla was nearly shot scaling the outer fence, Shane taking down a guard with one swift blow. Inside, they found a server room hidden beneath concrete, dusty, forgotten, and still warm. The drive was in a sealed cabinet, marked with a symbol from Lena's journal. This one was different. It didn't hold data. It held blueprints for a device, something called Athena's box, a prototype that could erase global digital trails, bank records, government files, satellite telemetry, a tool of ultimate invisibility. And someone was building it. We're not fighting criminals anymore, Shane said, eyes wide. We're fighting ghosts, and then, just as they left the base, a message blinked across the laptop screen. We see you. Followed by another. The Crown does not forgive. Drive 6 was the most protected of them all, encrypted in an AI-locked vault buried beneath a corporate skyscraper in Tokyo. They needed help. Nora flew in. Lena hacked the system. It took 6 days. Layla barely slept. Shane bruised his ribs in a fight with a guard, but when the drive cracked open, they saw it. Names, dates, coordinates, and a final note. Drive 745, 7867N, 686447. Layla pulled up the GPS. Mont Blanc, France, the top of the world. They knew what it meant. One final climb, one final truth. But just before they could leave, as they crossed the snowy tarmac in Zurich, gunfire erupted from the roof. Layla went down, blood on her coat, a bullet slicing across her shoulder. Shane dropped to his knees beside her, screaming her name. Then everything went black, and from the shadows, someone stepped forward. Not Carson, not the sniper, a woman in a long red coat, lips painted like blood. She bent down, smiling softly. The king is ready to meet you, she whispered to Shane, and he wants her alive. Layla woke to the rhythm of a helicopter cutting through the icy winds, her body aching, head pounding, the scent of antiseptic and jet fuel thick in her lungs. The ceiling above her was white steel, the hum of rotors louder than her thoughts. She tried to move, but her arms were restrained, and a sharp jolt of pain shot through her left shoulder where the bullet had torn through her. Panic rose in her throat. You're awake. The voice belonged to the woman in the red coat, now sitting across from her, unbothered by the storm of snow outside the chopper windows. Her face was elegant, ageless, her eyes sharp enough to slice through steel. Who are you? Layla rasped, throat dry as sand. I'm the messenger, the woman said, crossing her legs. And you're the reckoning. The helicopter banked hard to the left. Layla caught a glimpse of jagged white peaks, the summit of Mont Blanc like a jagged crown piercing the clouds. You're taking me to the final drive, Layla said flatly. No, the woman replied. I'm taking you to the man who built the game you've been playing. Layla's heart slowed. The king. The woman smiled. Shane was going mad. He'd watched Layla bleed out in his arms, watched her be taken, helpless to stop it. The red-coated woman had disappeared into the white haze of snow, with Layla in tow, leaving only a mocking note in Lena's encrypted laptop. If you want your queen back, make the climb. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. Nora and Lena had already gone ahead to scout the trail, leaving Shane with a pack of emergency gear, weapons, and 6 drives, all now decrypted and linked into a puzzle that pointed to only one conclusion. The Hollow Crown had never been a metaphor. It was a real place, buried inside the bones of Mont Blanc, a hidden facility, off-grid, self-sustaining, the nerve center of a shadow empire. It ran every file they'd found, every assassination, every manipulation, every twist in their lives. Layla's whole story was tied to that mountain. And now, she was somewhere inside it. Inside the Hollow Crown, Layla was led through a tunnel of steel and stone, her boots crunching against ice-lined metal. Guards lined the walls in sleek black uniforms, faces masked. No one spoke. No one needed to. The silence screamed of power. Then the doors opened. The throne room, if it could be called, that was a circular chamber with windows that overlooked the Alps. In the center sat a man in a tailored black suit, his back turned, gazing into the white abyss. His voice came low and smooth. Layla, Rose Callahan. She froze. He turned. She knew his face. From the photographs on Drive 4, from her childhood memories, half buried and twisted. He was older now, but unmistakable. Her father. Hello, darling, he said. Her knees gave out. Shane climbed, through wind that screamed like ghosts, over ice that cracked beneath his boots. Every muscle in his body burned, but he kept going. Layla's face was in every breath, every heartbeat, every reason. At the summit, Nora waited. There, she said, pointing toward what looked like an avalanche site. But beneath the rubble steel, a hatch. They blew it open. The Hollow Crown was real, and Shane was going inside. Layla stood before the man who had haunted the edges of her life for decades. You died, she whispered. No, he said. I disappeared. Why? Because I had to become something else, something bigger, for you, for the world. You created Carson. I created all of it. Carson was just the first pawn. You were meant to be the queen. Layla staggered back. I'm not yours. You've always been mine. I trained you through fire, through chaos, through pain, and now you have the strength to rule. He gestured to a control panel. 7 drives, 1 system, 1 command. Take my place. You're insane. No, he said, rising. I'm evolution. Just then the chamber erupted in alarms. Shane had arrived. Bullets rang through the hallways. Guards fell. Lena's voice crackled through hacked speakers, disrupting the power grid. Doors slammed open. Explosions rocked the lower levels. And then Shane burst into the room. His eyes met hers. She ran to him. They didn't speak, only kissed. Hard and raw and desperate. Time to go, he said. But her father held a gun now, pointed at Shane. Leave him or he dies, he said coldly. Layla stepped in front of Shane. You'll have to shoot me first. Her father didn't hesitate, but neither did she. She pulled the gun from Shane's holster and fired first. The bullet tore through the old man's chest. He crumpled, and Layla stood over him, trembling. I write my own story. Now. They escaped through fire and smoke, alarms screaming behind them as the hollow crown collapsed, triggered by Lena's remote failsafe. Helicopters fled. Data wiped. Everything Carson and the king had built turned to ash. Shane and Layla emerged from the mountain with Nora and Lena, bloodied but alive. The world didn't change overnight, but they had. They weren't fugitives anymore. They were survivors, legends. And as they stood on that snowy ridge, arms wrapped around each other, Shane leaned down, brushing his lips to hers. You still crave them? He murmured. Layla smiled against his mouth. Always. And then she kissed him like the war was over, even if the next chapter was just beginning.